crowd froze. The drunk American tourist, swaying, grabbed the horse's reins and tried to climb onto the guardsman's horse, but in the next moment the animal jerked, he lost his balance, and crashed onto the cobblestone pavement. What happened next was the harshest punishment, one he definitely didn't see coming. But let's start from the very beginning. On the narrow cobblestone streets near Buckingham Palace, a crowd of tourists had gathered, eagerly snapping photos of the British guards. Among them, one man stood out, a tall, fair-skinned guy in his mid-40s, dressed in a wrinkled Hawaiian shirt, ripped jeans, and cowboy boots. His face was flushed, and his breath reeked of alcohol. He was clearly drunk. In one hand, he held a plastic cup of beer, in the other, his phone, live-streaming the whole thing. "Yo, guys, check this out. British guards are like totally statues, man. But I bet I can ride that horse." He slurred into the phone with a drunken grin. People around him started glancing over. Some chuckled nervously, but most kept their distance from the loud tourist. He, however, stepped closer to the guard, who sat tall on his black stallion, his posture perfect. The young, fair-skinned guardsman had a stoic face, completely unfazed by the commotion. His horse, on the other hand, twitched its ears slightly but remained still. "Okay, here we go, guys. Watch me ride this royal stallion," the tourist yelled, waving his beer. The crowd froze. No one could believe he was actually about to do this. "This channel won't survive without your subscription and likes. Help me." The atmosphere outside Buckingham Palace was buzzing. Tourists crowded along the massive wrought iron gates, cameras and smartphones in hand. Most were focused on the sharply dressed British guard, sitting motionless atop his black stallion. But now, all eyes had shifted to one particular figure. A drunk American tourist wobbled on his feet, his floral print shirt wrinkled and unbuttoned nearly to his belly, revealing a thick gold chain glistening on his chest. His fair-skinned face was flushed from alcohol, and he clutched a plastic cup with the last sips of cheap beer. He had already drawn attention to himself, yelling into his phone, but now his intentions were becoming crystal clear. "All right, guys, this is it. Watch me ride this royal stallion like a true cowboy." He smirked at the camera, throwing his empty cup onto the pavement. The crowd reacted instantly. A murmur rippled through, some cringing in disapproval, others pulling out their phones to film. But the American ignored both judgmental stares and hushed warnings. His focus was locked on the royal horse. Staggering forward, he grabbed the horse's reins like he was leaning on a bar counter. The animal shuddered slightly, flicking its ears, but remained still for now. "Here we go, little buddy," he mumbled and tried to hoist himself up. But the alcohol had done its job. His movements were clumsy, coordination failing him. His feet barely left the ground before the horse jerked its head to the side. The sudden motion threw off the tourist's already shaky balance. His foot got tangled in the stirrup. His hands slipped from the reins, and a second later, he hit the cobblestone pavement with a loud thud. The crowd gasped. Someone stifled a laugh, but most held their breath. Cameras kept rolling. The moment was already going viral. "Mate, you're gonna get arrested," someone yelled from the crowd in a thick British accent. Instead of realizing the gravity of the situation, the tourist just burst into laughter. His entire body shook from drunken giggles, and lying on his back, he wiped his face with one hand. "Damn, that was a rough start. But hey, cowboys don't give up, right?" he mumbled, attempting to sit up. He wobbled back onto his feet, swaying like a ship in a storm, and grabbed the reins again, this time with both hands. The guardsman, who had remained motionless until now, pressed his lips together slightly but said nothing, maintaining strict discipline. Only a faint flicker of tension flashed in his gaze. Oblivious to the fact that he was pushing his luck, the tourist made another attempt to mount the horse. This time, he grabbed onto the saddle, pulling the reins so hard that the horse snorted and stepped back sharply. His boot slipped on the smooth stone pavement, and he nearly fell face first under the hooves. The crowd gasped again. Some instinctively stepped back, sensing imminent disaster. "Whoa, easy there, buddy. I just want to ride you," he muttered, waving a hand as if calming not a horse but an imaginary bartender. The horse twitched again, its nostrils flaring, and now the guardsman's fists visibly clenched. Meanwhile, by the palace gates, 2 security guards in black suits stepped forward. One of them, a tall man with a serious face, muttered something into his radio. It was clear. The tourist had mere seconds of freedom left. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, whispering, "He's done for." Some giggled. "This is better than a Netflix show." But the star of this spectacle seemed to be the only one unaware of the trouble heading his way. The crowd stood frozen in tense anticipation. Everyone knew security would step in any second, but no one expected it to happen so quickly, or so ridiculously. The drunk tourist, having completely lost all sense of restraint, grabbed the horse's reins again, yanking them so hard that the metal rings clanged loudly. That was a mistake. The animal, feeling the sharp tug, instinctively threw its head up with unexpected force. A deafening thud echoed through the square, the sound of a body hitting the stone pavement. The man, unable to keep his balance, toppled backward, slamming the back of his head against the hard ground. For a brief moment, there was complete silence. Even the horse stood still, as if listening. The crowd gasped. Some instinctively stepped back, while others leaned in, phones out, but no one made a sound. For a couple of seconds, the American lay motionless, arms sprawled out. His chest rose and fell heavily, his eyes staring blankly. Some thought he had blacked out, until a long, drawn-out groan escaped his lips. "God damn horse, you stupid thing," he rasped, his voice hoarse and breath ragged. He tried pushing himself up onto his elbows, but the alcohol and the impact had done their job. His arms trembled and he collapsed onto his back again. At that moment, the expressions in the crowd shifted. The initial shock faded, replaced by something else, disgust. Some scoffed, others turned away, shaking their heads. "Jesus, mate, just stay down," muttered a British tourist, still filming. But the American wasn't giving up. Slowly, he rolled onto his side, breathing heavily, and with a groan, pushed himself up to his knees. His face twisted in irritation, lips curling into a sneer. Wobbling, he ran a hand over the back of his head and checked his fingers for blood. Seemed like he had only bruised himself, but that didn't cool his drunken fury. "This is bullshit, man," he muttered, glaring at the horse like it was somehow to blame for his failure. The horse, meanwhile, shifted uneasily, stepping from one hoof to the other, clearly unsettled. The guardsman, who had remained perfectly still this whole time, now slowly turned his head, his gaze locking onto the tourist for the first time. His face remained as expressionless as stone, but his jaw visibly tightened. And then something happened that no one expected. The guardsman moved. It was slow but deliberate. With measured precision, he drew his sword from its scabbard, pointing the blade directly at the drunken tourist. Sunlight glinted off the polished metal, sending a sharp reflection across the pavement. The distinct sound of steel sliding free rang out, surprisingly loud in the tense silence. "Stand down, sir." His voice was low, firm, and almost menacing. The crowd erupted. Some gasped, some chuckled, and others simply watched, wide-eyed. The whole thing felt straight out of a movie. But the tourist, seemingly the only one oblivious to the gravity of the situation, simply stared at the guardsman, then burst into laughter. Drunken, slurred laughter echoed across the square. "Oh, the toy soldier speaks. What you gonna do, poke me with that butter knife?" He cackled, swaying unsteadily. Now the crowd wasn't hiding their disgust. Some rolled their eyes, others shook their heads in disappointment. It was clear, Everyone, including security, had reached their limit. Two men in black suits, palace security, were already closing in. One of them pulled out a radio, speaking rapidly into the mic. The other clenched his fists, visibly ready to step in. It was only a matter of seconds before this spectacle reached its final act. Seconds later, two royal security guards in black suits grabbed the tourist by the arms, hauling him to his feet. He tried to resist, but the alcohol only made him stumble. "Yo, man, let me go! This is a misunderstanding," he slurred, but no one was listening. The guardsman, still holding his sword, stepped forward and leaned in slightly, his voice cold as ice. "You have violated the dignity of the King's Guard. You will face consequences." The crowd gasped. The security officers wasted no time dragging the tourist away. But it wasn't over yet. One of them pulled out a small plastic card and held it up. "Public disturbance and assault on a royal horse. £5,000 fine and a permanent ban from the UK," he announced officially. The crowd exploded. Some laughed out loud, others clapped. The American began protesting. "Wait, what? 5,000? Man, I barely touched the horse." But no one cared anymore. The crowd parted, watching as he was dragged toward a police car. The last thing he managed to yell before being shoved inside, "Damn Brits! You take this royal stuff too seriously." The crowd erupted in laughter again, and someone shouted back, "Enjoy your band, mate." The horse, once again, stood motionless as if nothing had happened. The guardsman, as if flipping a switch, returned to his statue-like posture. The show was over, but within hours, the video of his arrest went viral, making him a star, in the worst way possible.